So welcome to our talk on Saint Romanus, the melodist and the icon of the feast. And as I started preparing for this, I thought I'm probably going to talk a lot more about Romanus than I am about the icon. But the reason I combined the two is because whenever I read the Kontakion, which I'll explain what it is in a minute, I think of the I think of the icon. And whenever I look at the icon, I think of the hymn, which leads me to believe that the one was composed in the light of the other. In other words, St. Romanus either was looking at the icon as he composed, or the iconographers took the hymn and made the icon from the hymn, because they're very closely related and very, very beautiful. And I think you'll find that a lot of the things that are in the picture are in the hymn. Okay, so Saint Romanus the Melodist is the patron saint of music for the Eastern churches, the patron saint of church singers. And as I am a church singer, I have his icon here. And you can see in the icon, he's actually got the words of the Christmas Kontakion that you're going to sing in 2 days on the icon. So he's sort of to the east what Saint Cecilia is to the west, although I don't think Saint Cecilia has any hymns that she wrote. So they're a little bit different. Romanus is not a martyr, he's a musician. He's actually a working musician. It's like if you canonized Bach, which we couldn't do because he was Lutheran. But I want to talk about singing in the church. So singing in the church has always been part of the church. It isn't an add-on. It isn't something we came up with in the 60s. It has always been done. Uh, you don't read anything. In the church fathers, everything's chanted. Um, and it's chanted in a way that is different from secular music. So if you look at the early canons of the church, and especially if you're a musician, the early canons are a little bit threatening if you're a musician or an actor or an actress, because they say musicians and actors and actresses are excommunicated. And you think, well, why is that? I'm a musician, I'm an actor. Well, because, where would you be getting your gigs? You'd be playing guitar for Zeus. That was what you would have been doing. So secular music would have been pagan music. Literally, it would have been for the worship of the Olympian gods or for whoever else. And so that's why there are no instruments in the church properly. In the Eastern Church, we have preserved this. In the Western Church, they have orchestras sometimes, which are very beautiful, but the original practice is no instruments. Instruments are secular. Instruments are for the worship of the demons, Zeus and such. And so we don't have them. So the music is, by design, very different. The music is typically monophonic, which means one melody line. We Ruthenians, ethnic and adopted, we Ruthenians don't like one melody line. We like to harmonize everything. Uh, Disobedient, but no, it's so. And the point of it is, you have to think of what the point of music is. When I first started cantering, this would have been 1996, when Father Filaret of blessed memory looked at me and pointed at me and said, "Cantor." Uh, and they didn't have any music. This was a Melkite church, and he said, "Sing what I sing." So I kind of jumped in and did it by ear. But in the beginning of, I think, Byzantine Daily Worship, which was a Melkite prayer book, I still have it somewhere. It says, the singing is for the glory of God, not for the glory of the musician. So uh, you have to take that to heart. If you are a church musician or if you like music in the church, there's always a temptation for the musical people. I can speak, I'm one of them, for the musical people to want to show off. Uh, and so the reason for the restrictions on music are so that we can't do that. If you let the musicians run your church, don't do it. Don't do it. You tell them what they're allowed to do. You don't let them do what they want. Um, or you'll end up with, well, no, I don't want to name names. Okay, so the music of the church is also, you want to think, why would you sing? Why does everything have to be sung? Well, you're in a church, say in the year 300. How do you hear what's going on? There's no amplification, okay? And so the sound is not coherent. The way I think of it, singing's like an audible laser. So laser is coherent light that you can burn things with. Having people sing makes it be more unified. So you'll notice this if you go to liturgy and like just think how loud is it when you're all singing the Our Father versus when you're just saying, I believe and profess that you are Christ, Son of the living God. So it gets softer. When we're singing, uh, it is audible. It is also metrical. We're going to find that out with Romanos that he is a poet. He is an actual poet. In other words, this is as much poetry as Dr. Seuss's poetry. Okay? And probably for the same reason, because all the Who's down in Whoville loved Christmas a lot, but the Grinch who lived north of Whoville did not. I bet you were saying that line along with me, right? You can remember a poem. The Assyrian came down like a wolf on a fold. My love is like a red, red rose, you know? Roses are red, violets are blue. I can't remember the rest of the poem, and you can't too. So the but you, a shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's the rhythm that gets you to remember it. And so if the singing is supposed to be didactic, it will be sung, it will be eventually rhythmic. Okay, so fast forward a bit. So in the early church, there's no instruments. One of the most humbling lines I ever read is I have a collection of patristic writings on singing. One's directed to the cantor. It says, beware that you sing beautifully in the church, and then in your heart you are bringing yourself to hell. So there's always that temptation. You know, you can do beautiful things and still be rotten on the inside. But we want to be beautiful on the inside too. Okay, so you have a particular kind of musician. It's not a secular music. It's supposed to be different. I This is Karl speaking. This is no authority in the church. I think the things that we did in the church in the last 60, 70 years to try to make our music more like secular music, in my opinion, was a profound mistake. It shouldn't be anything at all like secular music because it's not. It's for the worship of God. Its purpose is to bring us closer to God. The purpose of Nicki Minaj is not that. You know, so it shouldn't sound like any of that stuff. So it should be weird. You should walk into church and be overcome with beauty, as Augustine was in St. Ambrose's cathedral in Milan. Uh, so let's fast forward. In the 300s, you had Syrian poets. The Church of the East was very productive of poets. One of them that you know is St. Ephrem. You pray his prayer during Lent. And you can get a book, I think, from Popular Patristics of the poems of St. Ephrem. They are beautiful. You should have that book on your shelf and read it. Gregory the theologian wrote poems. He wasn't from Syria, but he has beautiful theological poetry. It is not read enough. Uh, we in the Byzantine Church, we have a blessings of too much content. You know, we have too much good stuff and we don't even do it. Like the Kontakion, which we're going to talk about, we don't even do them anymore. We should. We do them a couple of times, but I would love to chant this in the church. Um, so then we have, a little bit later than that, we have Romanus, the melodist, who we really, as a scholar, as a churchman, I say we know his story. As a scholar, I'm like, I don't know how much of this is true, but I'm willing to accept it. So I'm going to tell you the story. So this is just from orthodoxwiki.org. So the popular patron of church singers, Saint Romanus, was born in Emesa in the latter part of the 5th century. Whether or not his Jewish parents converted to Christianity is uncertain. Romanus himself was baptized as a young boy and developed a great love for the house of God. When he came of age, he served as a verger, lighting the lamps and preparing the censer. After moving to Beirut in Lebanon, he was ordained to the diaconate and assigned to the Church of the Resurrection. He had a rather mediocre voice, but his pure and simple heart was filled with love for God, and to assist at the church services gave him the greatest joy. During the reign of the Emperor Anastasius, the young deacon moved to Constantinople. He led an ascetic life of prayer and fasting, but in his humility he thought of himself as being rather worldly. He had a special love for the Mother of God, and would go at night to pray in the Blachernae church, which housed the precious Omophorion of the Holy Virgin. The saintly patriarch Euthemius loved Romanus for his many virtues and paid him the same wage as those singers and readers who were more educated and more talented. At this point, Karl says, they got paid. The latter resented this and derided Romanus for his evident lack of musical and theological training. Romanus himself was painfully aware of these defects. He longed for a melodious voice worthy of leading the faithful in praising God. All right, so here's the good story of the saint. It was the day before the feast of our Lord's Nativity, Christmas Eve. Well, I think in these days it would have been, I think they celebrated it on January 6th. Well, that's trivia. And St. Romanus was assigned to lead the singing that evening at the all-night vigil. He was responsible not only for this singing, but also for the text of the hymns. It didn't go very well. After everyone had left, he remained in the Blachernae church and tearfully entreated the Mother of God to help him. Exhausted, he fell asleep with his sorrow. In answer to his prayer, the Mother of God appeared to him in a dream. She handed him a scroll and said to him gently, "Here, eat this." Romanus did so and awoke, overcome with joy and the lingering presence of the heavenly visitor. When it came time that night for him to sing, St. Romanus received the patriarch's blessing and, vested in a special garment reserved for the principal singer, he stepped onto the ambo. So the ambon prayer, by the way, it was the raised pedestal in the center of the church where you would preach from or perhaps even sing from. We don't have a raised pedestal these days, but maybe someday. He began to sing, "Today the Virgin gives birth to him who is above all being," which you know as our hymn for Christmas. The emperor, the patriarch, the clergy, the entire congregation listened in wonder at the profound theology and the clear, sonorous voice which issued forth. They all joined in the refrain, "A newborn babe, the pre-eternal God." Later, St. Romanus told the patriarch about his vision, and the singers who had made fun of him prostrated themselves in repentance and humbly asked the saint's forgiveness. I love this story because, as a musician, this is also kind of a musician thing, You compete with each other. And I can just imagine a bunch of them saying, "This guy's no good," and then he's good, and now they have to say, "You're good." Um, it should be noted that the Kontakion as we know it today, a short hymn honoring and describing a particular, well, I'll talk more about that later, but that's the story of his life. He allegedly wrote, he is attested to have written something like 8,000 hymns celebrating the feast of the ecclesiastical year. I think we have about 34 of them left, and it's hard to find them in English. I think it's time for a reprint. I think Archimandrite Ephraim Lash has an edition, but the other edition that I found is from 1970. So if anybody's into book publishing and wants to publish, that would be good. All right, so what is a Kontakion? The word Kontakion refers to the reed upon, or the stick upon which the scroll would be rolled. It doesn't have anything to do with the hymn. It's just the thing rolled up on the stick. So you get a sense that they're kind of long. But what it was is, and this is where you see the Syrian influence, it is a homily in verse and song. It is, so you have to imagine, you go to liturgy and Father Elias comes out after the gospel and rather than talking, mounts on the ambon and starts singing. verse after verse after verse, and that's the homily. And that's what they had. And you can think, why would they do this? Well, it's again, go back to the beginning, it's participatory, it's rhythmic, you're going to remember it. You know, how much do you remember of a homily? Sometimes you don't remember everything that he says, right? But if he sang it, you know, you remember song lyrics. Uh, so th this was the purpose of the Kontakion. It became uh, really the dominant form of liturgical poetry until the seventh, eighth century. We don't do them anymore. We do them a few times. We do them at the funeral of a priest, I believe, and we do one. The Akathist hymn to the Virgin Mary is a sort of Kontakion. Uh, it is also supposed to have been written, and I believe it to have been written by Saint Romanos himself. So you've already, if you've ever done the Akathist hymn, you've already uh, chanted some of his poetry. Um, all right. Why did it go away? Well, maybe we should talk about what it is first, and then I'll talk about why it went away. All right. So it is, if you look at the I have a little bit of Greek. I don't know if any of you can read Greek letters. The first thing that I gave you is the text, translated by Ephraim Lash. Today the Virgin gives birth to him who is above all being, and the earth offers a cave to him whom no one can approach. Angels with shepherds give glory, and magi journey with a star. For to us there has been born a little child, God before the ages. Okay, so you're going to sing a version of that in a day or two. We're going to sing it at our house at Holy Supper tomorrow. I hope you're having a Holy Supper. Uh, I remember, this is a side note, when we joined that church in Illinois, our friend Cy and Dot, they invited us to their house for Holy Supper, and so we kind of stole their customs. All right, so here is the Greek. If you don't, I wanted to show you the Greek. Uh, well, if you don't have any Greek letters, this will be Greek to you. But if you look at the acrosticus at the top. Okay, so this is the closest we have to a critical edition. This is from Oxford Clarendon Press. If anybody's looking for presents to get from me, there's one of these on Thrift Books for $30. But this is from archive.org. So one of the characteristic features of a Kontakion is that each stanza starts with a different letter that spells something out. So that, and if Father Elias is here, he would correct my Greek, I'm sure. Uh, Tu tapenu Romanu ho hymnos. So, of the humble Romanus, the hymn. So, if you go through the 24 strophes, the 24 stanzas of this, the first one starts with a T. The second one starts with an O. The third one starts with an upsilon. Okay, so the stanzas themselves spell things out. It's quite often the name of the composer. So that's kind of cool. Um, it has a proemium, it has a prelude. So that's this bit. He parthenos semeron ton hupa ousion tikte. Um, this is the thing that we're going to sing. On this day, the Virgin comes. Okay. But it goes much longer than that. I might have it open in another window, but it has a bunch of stanzas. And the thing about the stanzas is they are metrically identical. Okay. So it actually really is poetry. Let me see if I can, I'm going to share again. This one, I think. Yeah. Okay. So this is from Archive, uh, the Greek edition. This is the thing I just showed you. You could see uh, each of these is a stanza. They are metrically identical, by which I mean they have the same number of syllables. You could count them, and the same stress accents. So it's like, what is it like? It is like a sonnet of Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That's iambic pentameter. Well, it's more complicated than iambic pentameter. And I actually am not good enough at Greek to get the meter, but I assure you it's got it. I have counted syllables before in one of these, and it does match up. And so I want to point out Romanus is a melodist. Okay. He is um, that's exactly what it sounds like. He's singing. These are sung, so there would be a melody. We don't have the music. The problem is that written music, music notation, the earliest you get is maybe 1200, 1100. We really don't have music notation before the Renaissance that's worth anything because cantors would learn the melody from their dad, who was the cantor before them, who learned it from his dad. And so it'd be passed. Why would you write it down? You know, nobody ever figured that they might get invaded and lose their churches and their melodies. So I kind of would like to reconstruct one of these someday. You know, maybe this one. Maybe I'll compose a melody that matches the hard part is translating it into English with the same number of syllables. Because if we're going to do it right, it's got to be strict, right? And then we'd sing from side to side and have two choirs. This Kontakion was sung with double choirs, so we know a little bit about how it was done for the emperor up until the 12th century. So the emperors would get this. This would be their Christmas gift. They would get the Kontakion of on the person of Christ of Romanus the Melodist sung with a double choir. Probably it would go from side to side. Probably if later practice is a guide, they would come together for the beginning and the end. Um, but you have to imagine the poetic effect. All right. So we have 24 verses, and at the end of them, you know, you sing the refrain, which in this translation is a little child, God before the ages. Okay. And you keep going and you keep going. And it's a Byzantine service, right? So it's long and you keep going and you keep going and you keep getting hit with the same melody and theological truth and beauty. And you're in like a candlelit church and there's an icon of the feast up on the wall. And I invite you to imagine, this is kind of why I want to do it, to imagine the effect that this would have on you spiritually as you go through this. Uh, I sure want to do it. I mean, if you've ever been to the Great Canon of St. Andrew of Crete, it's not a Kontakion, it's something different, but it has a similar effect, right? If you've ever gone through the whole thing. If you haven't, this is also something you should do. Uh, if you have to drive 5 hours to go someplace that's doing the Great Canon, just get a hotel room and go do it. Wear comfortable shoes. Okay. Um, the canon, which comes after the Kontakion, before we dig into the poetry, I'll just say why we don't do these anymore. The church moved away from them, probably, I suspect, because musicians being musicians and these being somewhat free form, they got too complicated, too extravagant. There is a church council in 692, the council in Trullo. It's not, is it ecumenical? Probably not. It's the fifth, sixth council. It's the council in between the fifth and the sixth ecumenical councils. And they have a quote from that council that said this. This is the 75th canon of the council in Trullo. We will, this is the fathers of the council, we will that those whose office it is to sing in the churches do not use undisciplined vociferations nor force nature to shouting, nor adopt any of those modes which are incongruous and unsuitable for the church, but that they offer the psalmody to God, who is the observer of secrets with great attention and compunction, for the sacred oracle taught that the sons of Israel to be pious. Well, I feel seen, as the kids say, undisciplined vociferations. And so it was shortly after this, in the century following this, that we moved on to the canon, which we still do today, which we do in Matins, which is pretty strictly based on the Old Testament canticles. For the canon that you would know best, it would be the Paschal Matins. This is the Resurrection Day. You know that one? It's a hit. Um, and so canons replaced the Kontakia, and the canons are all in a mode. So it's like the eight tones also came in at that point, um, as far as I can tell. So we don't do Kontakions anymore, but they're beautiful, and maybe we should read them. All right, so I wanted to talk a bit about this poem, and you can also look at if you don't want to, you could just look at an icon if you have an icon of the Nativity. So one thing you'll notice in generally all Byzantine hymnography is that it is has parallel structures and antitheses. So you'd note in the biography of the saint, they say he was born of Jewish parents. Maybe. I don't know. But a lot of the scholars would say he has Hebraic poetry. This reads like the Bible, in other words. And I think, yes, that's true. Anyone who reads the Bible, I just don't know. I mean, if you're immersed in Scripture, your poetry is going to sound like the Bible. So I don't know that that's evidence. It doesn't really matter. But today, the Virgin gives birth to him who is above all beings. So you have the comparison of the Virgin with the one who is all above all being, the super essential one in Greek. So that's one antithesis. And you can see it in the icon. If you look at the icon, you see the Virgin in the middle, in the cave, right? And you see the little baby Jesus. Does the baby Jesus look like a baby? Okay. So he is painted with the uh, proportions of a strong man. And if you look at his halo, if you have very good eyes, you can look at his halo, and what will you see on his halo? Uh, well, you'll see some more Greek. You'll see haon, okay? Omicron, omega, nu, which uh, in the Septuagint, when Moses asks the Lord God Almighty to give him a name, God says in Greek that he is Haon, which means the one who is, which in um, I think the New American Bible is something like I am who am. Well, we kind of lose that in the Greeks from whom we come. It's the one who is. That's the name of God. And so when you look at an icon, this one in particular, that's not just a baby in her lap. The halo is saying in the Greek that the people would know if they could read, this is the one who is above all being. Contrast, the virgin from Bethlehem, but she's not from Bethlehem, but the virgin in Bethlehem and the one who is above all being, they are in a cave. The earth offers a cave to him whom no one can approach. Another antithesis. And then we have parallel construction here. Angels and the shepherds give glory. I would have translated this a different way. And the magi with a star do journey, because the journey and the glory are parallel in the text. So we have angels and shepherds and magi with the star. Stars are going to be important as well in this poem. Do you see the star in the icon right in the center? It has a line coming down, and if you connect it with the other aspects of the image, it makes a cross. There is a cross hidden in the icon. For unto us there has been born a little child, God before the ages, which calls us back to the center of the image. Um, and I think it's delightful poetry. Um, it is hard to get a sense for the melody and the rhythm in English. I really wish, people they like, if you had a time machine, where would you go? What would you do? Oh, I'd go see the Colosseum, or I'd go see, this battle or whatever. I'd go to the church at Blachernae in Constantinople and listen to Romanos chant this hymn. I think that's what I would do. So I want to know what it's like. Um, if you go to the second verse, we never do the second verse in the church anymore, but we could. There's no rule against it. I believe Kontakion would have been sung at Vespers and Matins, perhaps at Matins after the Matins Gospel. Um, Bethlehem has opened Eden, another uh, antithesis. An antithesis, you have something very high, something very low, but they both serve to illuminate the other. Bethlehem is a lowly town. It is the smallest town, least are you among the sons of Judah. It has opened Eden. We have found delight in secret. Let us receive the joys of paradise within the cave. I had to look up this reference here, the undug well from which David once longed to drink. There are a ton of biblical allusions in this poem. And you say, well, when did David want to drink from a well? And it's in the end of the second book of Kings. It's near the end of his life. And the Philistines have uh, surrounded Bethlehem, which is David's city. And he's just sitting there grumbling. And he says, I want to drink from that well. And a couple of his soldiers go and fight their way in and bring him some water from the well at some cost to the soldiers. And then he's kind of disgusted and probably at himself for saying such a reckless thing and says, I will not drink. This came with cost of blood. Well, there's all sorts of, you never thought that referred to the Virgin Mary, the undug well that quenches Adam and David's thirst. I like stanza 2 here. Okay. All right. So this is the second verse. O pater tes metros, gnome huios egenito, or something like that, which is the father of the mother has willingly become her son. Now, the Christology is a little bit odd, probably to your ears, but Jesus Christ is God. And in a sense, you could say the father, sort of. So you're like, the father of all becomes the son of the virgin. It's pretty interesting. I really like this one here, this second line, and I wanted to just show you the Greek. Hosoter ton brephos, and fatne eketos. So brephos is infant. This is part of the icon. Is if you look, I think in the bottom right of the icon, there are women. Sometimes Jesus appears twice. I can't remember if this one has him in there twice, but they'll be cleaning the baby, which is to emphasize that this is really a baby. This is really a baby, that Jesus Christ is a baby. So the savior of infants is an infant in a manger, which is, you have to let these things blow your mind. There's the baby Jesus down here in the bottom right, getting bathed, which babies need to have done to them. This is a testimony to the faith in the incarnation. It really happened. It really happened. It was a real baby. Babies do what babies do, and he did what babies do. He might have cried a little less, but so that's why I look at the icon and I read the poem and I think the one influenced the other. And then look here. So look in verse 2. Now the Virgin Mary is going to start talking. This is also really interesting. Uh, as she who bore him contemplates him, she says, so she starts talking. Tell me, my child, how were you sown, or how were you planted in me? I see you, my flesh and blood, and I am amazed, because I give suck, and yet I am not married. And though I see you in swaddling clothes, I know that the flower of my virginity is sealed, for you preserved it when in your good pleasure you were born a little child before the ages. So she starts talking and questioning her son, who was just born, and you can see this again in the icon. Look at how she's turned away. Okay? She's turned away. She's contemplating. As the Gospel of Luke says, I believe, she contemplated all these things in her heart. But artistically, poetically. So Marjorie Carpenter, who translated these in 1970, in her introduction, she speculates that the Kontakion, and perhaps even this particular one, is the reason we have Shakespeare. I'm going a little further than she does. But that the Byzantine dramatic homilies in verse we do know for a fact that this one was copied in Latin into the West. We know that the Christmas Kontakion made it West. That the drama in the West comes about through the mystery plays, which are very similar to the Kontakion in their structure. You have, saintly people talking to each other in elevated ways. It's not a play, and that there's no scenery. It's chanted in the church. But then again, I thought there is scenery because you would look at the walls of your church. And so it is a theatrical event. So I don't think she's so far off. I think that might be the case. My daughter and wife were asking about maybe doing some drama for the kids in our outreach. And I thought, well, we can just do this or some adaptation of this, or something like this, because it's entirely within our tradition. Dress the kids up as the Virgin Mary and as Joseph and as the angel and have them sing the parts. And it would be old school. It would be just like we had done before. High King, what have you to do with beggars? This is all addressed to Jesus Christ, Maker of heaven. Why have you come to those born of earth? There you go. Maker of heaven to those born of earth. Another antithesis, which again, in our faith, the importance of the incarnation, the importance that that baby in that icon is the creator. Here in Oklahoma, if you chat with the average Christian out there, sometimes they'll say things like God and Jesus. I just pray to God and Jesus that, and you're like, what? What do you mean God and Jesus? Because our Orthodox Catholic Christian faith teaches us that that's the same thing. It's right there in the icon. That is the maker of heaven who has come to those born of earth. This is again verse 3. Do you love a cave or take pleasure in a manger? See, there's no place for your servant at the inn. I do not say a place, not even a cave, for that too belongs to another. And so this recalls Sarah, Abraham's Sarah. When she bore a child, she was given a vast amount of land. But to Mary, by contrast, Isaac is an image of Christ. You know this, right? So let us go up to the mountain, carry the wood for the sacrifice. The God himself will provide the sacrifice. So the sacrifice of Isaac is the sacrifice of Christ foretold. Okay. So to me, not even a foxhole. I use the cavern where willingly you made your dwelling. And then everybody repeats the refrain, a little child, God before all ages. We have more. We have the Magi show up, led by a star. Let's go to 5. So if you have the Romanos Nativity, go to verse 5, because this one was interesting to me. For Balaam laid before us precisely the meaning of the words he spoke in prophecy when he said that a star would dawn, a star that quenches all prophecies and auguries. That's why the star is important in the icon. Jesus is the star more than the star is the star. A star that resolves the parables of the wise and their sayings and their riddles. A star far more brilliant than the star which has appeared, for he is the maker of all the stars, of whom it is written of old, from Jacob there dawns a little child before the ages. Okay, so if you look down in the footnote, if you look in the Romanos Nativity document that I gave you, if you have your Bible, and you go to Numbers 24:17, I see him, though not now, I observe him, though not near. A star shall advance from Jacob, and a scepter shall rise from Israel. That's the New American Bible, which is based on the Hebrew text. However, Romanos knows the Greek text. There was a Greek translation of the Bible called the Septuagint, which is older than the Hebrew text that we use. The Hebrew text is a reconstructed text that came a little bit later. So the Septuagint is what the early church used. And in the Septuagint, it says, 24:17, it says, a star will arise from Jacob and a man from out of Israel. So it's much more obviously a it's much more obviously a messianic prophecy. What do you think it would have been like to sit and listen to this or stand and listen to this? For me, okay, so I'll tell you a story. The when I was at the Byzantine Assembly in Whiting last year, this past year, one of the cardinals or bishops, I forget if he's a cardinal, from the Oriental congregation came and gave a talk. And he said, he told a story, and haven't been able to find this any other testimony of the story, but he told a story that there were, some Orthodox visitors at the Second Vatican Council. And they got the tour of the Vatican. Here's, the grave of St. Peter, and here is the Baldacchino, and, all of this stuff. And here's the museum, and here's the Swiss Guard. And then he turned to the visitors who didn't know who they were and said, and you, what do you do? And they looked at him and they said, what do? We celebrate the Divine Liturgy. And I thought that that was the perfect quote. That's not just for them, but for us. What do you do? What do you do in your life? You celebrate the Divine Liturgy. And how much better would it be to go into church with your friends and your community and the incense and the candles and the beautiful music and the hymns? We really do have a treasure, which we only dip into a little bit. So we're only going to do the beginning of this Kontakion on Christmas Day. There's always more that we could do. The goal is to fill your life with church. And for our church, if you fill your life with church, you're filling your life with a whole lot of poetry, which I don't know, I think is a good thing. The icon is, what else is there in the icon? The angels and the shepherds who are on a parallel line. On the upper left, there are the wise men bringing gifts, led by a star. So this is in verse 6. When they'd heard these amazing words, she bowed low and worshipped the offspring of her womb. And with tears, she said, Great, my child, great is all that you have done for me in my poverty. For see, magi are outside seeking you. The kings of the east seek your face. And the rich among your people beg to see you. For truly your people are those to whom you have been made known as a little child, God, before the ages. So the Magi have shown up. Was this Bethlehem or Nazareth? I don't know. In the icon, it's Bethlehem. I want to go to 7 here. Actually, I want to do 7 and 8. 7 and 8 might be enough, and then we could decide if we want to continue, but that would be an hour. So this is the Virgin Mary speaking. Now, this is all, you have to admit, it is a work of fiction, okay? This is a hymn. It is saying things that we do not know that Mary actually said. So this is the poetic imagination being let loose on a biblical topic. I can see the danger of this. If it's not, this is the danger of all art. It's like the danger of Western religious art, which went and got very, very weird because it was left to be unconstrained. And I could see similar things in music. Well, anyway, so 7 and 8 here. So since they are your people, my child, bid them come under your roof, that they may see rich poverty, precious beggary. There you go, some more antitheses. They are poor but rich. You I have as glory and pride, therefore I am not ashamed. You are the grace and beauty of my dwelling and of me. Nod and let them enter. So the image is that the baby Jesus says, come on in. My poverty does not worry me. I hold you as a treasure that kings have come to see. For kings and magi know that you have appeared a little child God before the ages. And then Jesus speaks in the Kontakion. I don't know how you would do this as a drama with the kids in the church. You'd have to have a narrator give the voice of Jesus. So Jesus, this is verse 8, Jesus the Christ and truly our God secretly touched his mother's mind, saying, Bring in those I have brought by my word, for it is my word which shone on those who are seeking me. To the senses it is a star, but to the mind a power. It accompanied the Magi as my minister and still stands fulfilling its service, showing its rays the place where there has been born a little child, God before the ages. So the star, Jesus is the star. The visible star is it's like a metaphor of the star. The actual star is Jesus. Also, you can note there's some plays on the words here. Bring in those I have brought by my word, for it is my word. Well, word, what is word in Greek? It's logos. So this all refers to the fourth gospel that Jesus Christ, this baby, is the Word, the incarnate Word, the uncreated Word of God. I don't know. Let's look at nine. Let's do nine. One more. One more verse at least. Maybe two. Therefore now receive, Holy Lady, receive those who have received me, for I am in them as I am in your arms. I did not leave you, and yet I came with them. This is another declaration of the divinity. So up here you have the Magi who are coming, okay? They have accepted Christ. Christ is with them, and yet Christ is right there. So Jesus Christ is in, well, at least three places in this icon. He's with all of the believers who came to give worship, and he's in the manger because he is God. He did not cease to be God. So she opens the door and receives the company of the Magi. She opens the door. She, the unopened gate through which Christ alone has passed. So Romanos there is referring to Ezekiel 44. If you've ever come to church for Vespers for a feast of the Virgin Mary, and they've done Old Testament readings, it was almost certainly Ezekiel 44 about the closed gate on the temple through whom only the king could go, the sealed gate. And that is, of course, a type of the Virgin Mary. So if your Protestant friends say, why are you so insistent on the perpetual virginity? Well, because the Bible is. Like the burning bush, the bush that's not consumed by fire, the gate of the temple through whom nobody goes, the uh, walking through the Red Sea with dry feet. You know, it's all types of the Virgin Mary. Let's do 11. So they're wondering why Joseph is here. Because he's not the father. Why is he hanging around? And Mary has an answer. I will tell you, Mary said to the Magi, why I keep Joseph in my house. I found myself kind of charmed by that. In this hymn, the Virgin Mary is deciding that Joseph can stay, which is not typical of our thinking of Saint Joseph. I will tell you why I keep Joseph in my house, to refute all those who slander me. He will tell what he has heard about my child, for in his sleep he saw a holy angel. There he is down in the left, sleeping. Here he's being tempted, but he does see an angel in his sleep, who told him how I had conceived. In the night, a fiery vision told the creature of thorn about the things which grieved him. That is why Joseph is with me, to show that there is a little child, God before all ages. I want to open this up to questions and thoughts, and because I could do the whole poem. Uh, it is, to me, a testimony of the hymnographic riches of our church. We celebrate people who wrote the hymns. They were great saints. Uh, they wrote icons of sound, if you think about it. We have an iconographic church that gives us images of the Holy Truths. We also have poems about the Holy Truths, just as much. So the one or the other, the one influences the other. I know that we cannot celebrate all of the hours. We cannot do every poem. You do have to work for a living. You know, I read somewhere that in order to do all of the Byzantine liturgical hours correctly in their fullness with the good music, the colophonic music would take about 26 hours, which you could see you couldn't do because the day's only 24 hours. So you'd always be running behind. But there's something to that, you know, and it's just there's a fullness and a plenitude in our tradition that we still only scratch the surface. And maybe that's all we can do because, you know, we are on earth. When you go to liturgy and the priest says, blessed is the kingdom of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, you are entering the kingdom, but then you've got to go work and eat. So you have to leave the kingdom. You know, what do? We celebrate the divine liturgy. And in heaven, they do it forever and eternally, and we do it bit by bit. And sometimes through poetry. All right, I think that's all I'm going to say. So let's do question time.
Today the Virgin gives birth to the transcendent One, and the earth offers a cave to the unapproachable.
Over the years, I have visited many Eastern churches, and one of the things that is very discerning to me is that from one church to another, the cantor will change the tempo such that it no longer is a celebration, but it's like a death knell. They are not consistent.
Well, okay, so cantering is difficult. Um, there you have to be a particular type of musician. You have to be very confident. You have to be loud. You have to show up. That's the most important is you have to show up. 90% of it is showing up. And so we honor all the cantors who step up and do it. Um, I personally do like a more brisk pace. In the Greek church, and I forget the names, there are irmologic chants, and then there's the other kind that I can't remember, papadic or something. Maybe there's three kinds of music in the Greek Orthodox Church. Some of them are fast. And so doing the stuff for the saint of the day should be pretty quick because the point of it is to give the listeners the text. The point isn't the beauty. The point is the text. So it can be fast. As a the other kind of chant would be, which we do in our church, praise the Lord from the heights, Alleluia. You can sing that slow because that music has a different function. That music is to fill the space, kind of like the gold in the back of the icon, as people are going to communion, to fill it with beauty. And you're not necessarily, I mean, you're singing a psalm text, but you're also taking up time. The cherubic hymn is like that. So you shouldn't sing the cherubic hymn fast because the priest has to get everything ready. And if it's the bishop, they have to do the proskomedia. And so you're going to sing it a whole bunch of times. And that would be a time where you could stretch it out, be a little bit more melodic, a little bit more beautiful from the standpoint of the singer. Singers like to do fancy stuff. That's one of the times to do it. But
Uh,
Also, if I may add, it's a function of the cherubic hymn to slow the people down. Let us lay
yes,
aside all earthly cares and get ready for what's about to happen.
yeah. Yes, James, I told this story before to some people. When Father Filler drafted me to be a cantor, okay, I had come from when I was a young man, he would so I grew up going to a church that Father would say the mass very, very quickly. He was a large man. It was hot. The air conditioning didn't work. On a Saturday evening in the summer, he could get it done. My brother and I, when we got digital watches, this shows you how old I am. When digital watches came out, we would time it, and he came in under 20 minutes once with all the parts.
Is this Roman Divine Liturgy or
Yep,
Byzantine?
Roman, very quick,
Oh, yeah, okay.
very, very quick. He didn't mess around, at least not in that. Um, and I found myself looking at my watch as I was cantering at St. George in Milwaukee, and I'm looking at my watch at the exact moment, lay aside all earthly cares, and I got mad and I pulled my watch off and I flung it in the back of the canter stand, and just I had to break myself of that habit, and so the I had to become what I was singing. Yeah. So, but for example, the creed, I don't think you should sing slowly on the creed. It's not poetry. It's a dogmatic declaration. It could go pretty quick. Yeah, so that's my opinion, David. But we are all thankful for the people who step up and canter. It is a difficult thing. There aren't that many people. It's like the Marines, except we're not getting shot at. But it's like the Marines. There's only so many people who could be Marines, and then of that number, there's only so many that will join, and of that number, there's only so many that'll pass basic training. So musically, there aren't very many people who are capable of doing it, and of that number, not very many people will step up. It really is a vocation. On that note, uh, the Metropolitan Cantor Institute, which is a marvelous resource, is offering classes. Some of them are free. I think those are asynchronous. You can just go and look, like classes on the Divine Liturgy, on music in general, and then they are enrolling for guided classes that you can get with real singing teachers. And I encourage any of you who have any interest to do that. I'd also say um, we are blessed with 5 children. We have kept up with music lessons for them. Well, the 22-year-old, she can pay for her own lessons. But if you have kids and they say, I don't want music lessons, you give them piano lessons and they complain about it, it is my opinion that you should ignore the complaints and continue it as part of their basic education. In Plato's Republic, you had to be able to do music to be a philosopher king. You have to be able to understand harmony and what things are beautiful. And from my standpoint, as Byzantine Catholic, our churches need singers. That just like they need priests and vocations, you need vocations to cantor. And if you don't give them music lessons, they won't be able to. So you have to give them the opportunity. It's good for them anyway. It's good to study music, even if you don't have much talent. It's good to study. But for the ones that do have talent, then a certain number of them will show up and sing at your funeral. Which, right? You want somebody to chant at your funeral.
Yeah, many years ago, I was called to be a cantor at some of the mission churches, and I was an amateur, and yeah, I had to struggle. I had to struggle to learn the music, and I had to search for the music because back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't published all over the place. You had to go
Mhm.
look for it. Anyway, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, and you had to learn by ear.
That's correct.
Melkites didn't have any music. I had to, at least not at that point. So MCI is a marvelous resource. They have recordings. I don't like the pace of the recordings, David. I agree with you there, but you can learn the melodies. You can just click on them on your computer. What was that, James?
That might be why they're slow.
So that you can learn?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then you have to remember slow is good when you're learning, but not always good when you're practicing.
right, right. But at least you don't even need to be able to play piano. You can just start the audio file and sing along.
Oh, yeah.
And really,
They're wonderful.
one of the great points of having our eight-tone system. So, I mentioned how the canon comes in. We don't do Kontakia. Kontakia were a little complicated. We don't know the melodies. I can imagine there were a ton of melodies. And probably the only thing people were singing is the refrain. After Patriarch Germanus, Saint Germanus, and the reforms of the Quinsex Council, it's my opinion, I wrote a master's thesis on this, I don't know if it's true though, that the octoechos, the eight tones, were a church reform, a singing reform. And so we have eight main groups of, well, for Ruthenians, it's eight different sets of melodies. For the Greeks, it's more like eight scales. But anyway, there's eight of them. Well, everybody can do eight. There's eight because there are 7 weeks and a day from Pascha to Pentecost. So that makes eight. And eight is a fullness. If seven's the complete number, eight is the new creation number. That's why there's eight tones. But yeah, you can learn eight melodies. And so you can have a whole congregation sing without any music at all. Today's tone three, okay. They won't even know what it's called, but they'll know tone three and sing along. It's brilliant. So it's the way to do church music. My daughter plays at the local Roman Catholic church, which is very nice, very good. But you go and the hymn book has like they'll say something like for the communion hymn we will be singing number 1133, and I'm thinking you have over 1,000 hymns in your book. Who could possibly sing that? So I think maybe you ought to have eight hymns in your book. And just do them over and over again. Do them with different words, but just have eight hymns. Start with eight. Yeah. It would be bad for the music publishers, but I think it might be good for the singing. Uh, Anyone else?
Today the Virgin gives birth to the transcendent One, and the earth offers a cave to the unapproachable.
Yeah, I read a story somewhere that in Constantinople, the Arian heresy, apparently they were pop stars. They were very good at music. And so in order to combat the Arian heretics, you had to have competitive music. You had to have better music. So you'd have competing choirs.
The angels sing His glory with the shepherds. The wise men journey with the sun.
So if you didn't get any of the links, we can post them back for you. Uh, I wish there was a nice edition of Romanos. I have not been able to find one. Uh, but if you happen to be a publisher, there's an opportunity for you. So Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Cole.
Yeah, have a blessed Christmas.
Thanks very much, Carl. That was great, and I loved your image of being in church. With the icon there and listening to the singing. That was a good image. So,
We're going to do that in Tulsa on the 26th.
oh, cool.
So we have not recovered Romanos's music, no? So we have to come up with our own.
If we were going to, as an experiment, reconstruct the Kontakion, you would have to compose it. The first thing you would have to do is, well, you'd either have to sing it in Greek or you'd have to translate it really well into English to get the meter. And then you just need one melody, I think, maybe two, one for the prelude and then one for every stanza after that. But to get the full effect, the rhythm is very important. So that'll be the hard part. So I was going to say probably the last thing. So part of the story of Romanus is that he got the scroll from the Virgin Mary and ate it. And if any of you have ever attempted to write poetry, metrical poetry, it's really hard. I would rather eat a scroll than sit and try to work out the meter.
Image of eating the scroll is scriptural.
Yes.
I believe it's in Ezekiel and in Revelation. I think in both cases, when the prophet eats the scroll, it's sweet in his mouth and sour in his stomach.
Yeah, maybe writing poetry is like that too. All right, shall we wrap this up? Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you,
Yes,
Carl.
indeed.
Really
Very
appreciate it.
enjoyable.
Thanks, Cole.
You're welcome.
To